And because there's so many aldermen, firstly, the opportunity
What
for
does the
theater.
name mean, first of all?
Alderman is derived from the Old British system, and the term is alderman, alderman. You do not flatter a woman who holds the title, and there are plenty of women in the Chicago City Council by referring to her as alderwoman, because the title by statute is alderman.
Interesting.
And they are meant to be, in the best way, the face of a faceless bureaucracy to the citizens of Chicago. When it snows, you call your alderman to get the street plowed if it hasn't been plowed
It
yet.
sounds in a way almost like our do you live in the city, don't you?
Yes.
You know our ANC
Just a few
system?
blocks from here.
Okay, very good.
Yes,
But you know our ANC system, you know, the advisory
yes.
neighborhood. It's
Yes.
like a morphing of the city council with
But
the
I'm
ANC.
not sure they have the kind of individual authority.
Well, they have
Certainly
no
ours
power.
doesn't.
Well, nobody in D.C. has any power. What are we
Right,
talking
exactly.
about?
So that's, yeah. Individual aldermen do have some authority,
Right.
and particularly a powerful alderman like Sonny, who's also a
Right.
council chairman.
Right.
And the opportunity in a city that varied to have 50 aldermen from all over the city, obviously there's a lot of opportunity for theater, but you really can make the argument that individual neighborhoods and individual communities feel represented in a way that would be not as possible if you had a much smaller city council.
Now, you say, as all authors do, that none of it's based on real people.
Yes.
And yet, Chicago famously had a mayor who did die, and I think it was in his office.
And he had consumed a pizza just a few hours
I didn't know about the pizza. I knew there was some thought that he might have been poisoned.
God bless Mayor Washington. You could always say that that he probably ate something half an hour ago, whatever point in his life.
That is exactly what you say about this man.
Yeah, he is poisoned. Mayor Washington was not poisoned.
But there was some
Yes,
rumor. There were rumors at the time.
There were
many
rumors.
things.
There were rumors at the time,
Right.
and understandably because his loss meant a lot to the people of Chicago. So understandably those rumors crop up. But I mean, he and Mike Royko and I had the same physician in Chicago, Dr. Quentin Young, who will tell you no, there was nothing to that.
Right. It was a heart attack.
It was a heart attack. He was a large man and lived under a great deal of pressure, and these things happen, gosh knows. But the mayor in my book is poisoned. And it's interesting because a couple of reviewers, and the reviews have been very nice, have suggested that I'd come up with a new way of dispatching of public officials, which, firstly, is not true. I don't recommend it. But secondly, there's nothing new about it at all. Before they invented firearms.
Maybe not in Chicago.
Well, but this is the way Roman emperors and pharaohs were.
Many reviewers probably aren't thinking that far
I guess
back
they're thinking.
on the
I thought of it as a
timeline.
classic way of getting dealing with public officials.
But did you? You are from Chicago. You grew up in Chicago. Did the alderman system you knew? Did you have to go back and get back into it at all to write the book, or was it there?
Because it was it was important to me that I not write a book that was set back in the 70s or the 80s. Yeah, exactly. And we lived there for about a month. We sublet an apartment. It was my wife and our oldest daughter, Elise, the one who comes here, I don't mind saying, for your key lime pie.
One of our best customers.
Exactly.
She's all of how old?
She will be 5 this month.
We like that. We like the whole spectrum.
And so we moved there for a month and had a wonderful time, but I spent a lot of time just hanging out at the Chicago
And this was
City
just
Council.
research. You were there on research.
Yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
Did you do your show from there while you were there, or
no,
was this just a month off?
Yeah. And we had an awfully good time for a lot of different reasons. We had an awfully good time, but one of the important things I had to do was to see the city council I hadn't seen. I mean, this is a city council. I mean, Chicago, hog butcher to the world. This is a city council that has banned foie gras.
Yes.
I mean, you have to understand how much that city has changed, and for that matter, how much the city council that it represents has changed. And it was important for me to get to know the rhythms of the speech and to hang out and to talk to aldermen casually. I mean, I had interviewed aldermen over, but as you know, interviewing someone is often not the same as talking to them. And once they understood that I was writing a novel, in other words, no attribution. Right. And they were, I must say, enormously flattered by the attention.
Is it as diverse a group of people as you make it in the book, or did you jack that up
no,
for the book?
No, it is. Actually, the demographics very closely reflect. There's not an Indian immigrant in the city council, but there are many immigrants.
Well, maybe this might spur that on. There were some things that now is there one word that you use many times? And
Well, the one that the mayor of Chicago uses, antediluvian.
what is the what? Yes, that you love that word.
Well, he loved that
He
word.
loved that word,
He
but
loved it.
everybody else in the book loves the word
They pick
too.
it up because he's the
You
most famous
almost could have
person
named
in town.
the book that.
I find myself using it a lot now, as
Yeah.
a matter of fact.
Right.
You know, as you said, because when you start the tour, you kind of you have to remind yourself about the book that you've written. And so I began to pick it up and read it again. And my wife will tell you, like the week thereafter, I kept saying, you know, my gosh, this is what an antediluvian system they have. That sort of thing. It means before the flood, and I had to look it up myself.
Yes, and I did too. When you
The biblical flood, not
Yes, right.
not other floods that Georgetown is known for.
when you go back and read your book, is it a pleasure?
Gosh, I hope this doesn't sound immodest. I had a great time.
No, but wouldn't you want it to be the reaction?
Yeah,
God forbid that you're reading it and going, "Oh my God, I can't believe I wrote this."
No, you would, but my wife, God bless her, will still kid me that when I was rereading it every now and then I would just put down the book and say, you know, you got to hear this. And of course, she had 50 times at that point. But it reminds me, you know, that Truffaut film, Day for Night, and they're seeing the screening, and Valentina Corteza, I think, plays the actress, and she says, you know, every time I see one of my films on the screen, I say to myself, when did we do that? When did we do that? All I remember is the waiting. And you finally read your book when you hold it in your hands, and you're thinking, when did I write that? All I remember is, you know, is not writing at all.
Age and distance.
Yeah.
But then you get to have the experience that the reader has. You say politics doesn't kill people. Well,
A character says it, yeah.
but politics doesn't kill people, it just suffocates them little by little. Do you believe that? Do you know people who believe that?
I know people who believe that, and I guess we have to be careful saying that in Georgetown, but we have to be careful saying it anywhere. I think even people who've had a good, rich, and rewarding life in politics sometimes feel that way, because as I perhaps don't have to remind a lot of people who are here, the toll that public life can take from a person's life is enormous. Just the toll in hours, the toll in emotional energy.
Yeah,
it can
we see it. I mean, all you got to do is watch the Democratic primary, and you see it in Technicolor.
And you know, you like a Chicago alderman who goes to a meeting of the Lakeview Citizens Council on Thursday, has to go to a meeting of the Edgewater Citizens Council on Friday. He or she can't say, "I'm sorry, my daughter's in a high school play," or "I'm sorry, I feel a cold coming on and I just have to stay home," because it'll seem like they care less about the people in Edgewater than they did about the people in Lakeview. I think Sonny Rapini says at one point, no excuse short of kidney dialysis will satisfy
But
someone.
that is the essence of all politics is local.
It is. And, you know, and one thing I learned, too, about, because I must say, as a citizen, I've always been more or less vaguely in favor of campaign finance reform. I mean, as a journalist, I don't have an official position. But I understood how putting a cap on campaign limitations vastly increases the number of calls that a politician has to make. They won't go to bed, commonly, without calling 5 or 10 people just to cultivate a relationship. Not necessarily to ask them
The list
for
is
money.
always in the pocket.
Yes.
Free moment, make the calls.
Exactly.
In the back of the car, make the calls.
And in my novel, within the hours that Sonny becomes the mayor of Chicago,
yes,
his
very
political
clear.
assistant is there saying, these are people you ought to call. And he says, well, I mean, under the circumstances, I have a lot to do. Can't I duck it? And he would say, no, under the circumstances, that's why you have to make the call.
even more
because they
reason
will
to
be
call.
so grateful to know that in your first moments as mayor, you called them.
And with each call, you are the first call I'm making.
Yes, yeah.
Because there's the language. And then one other thing from the book that helps us segue into politics in general, I think, is you have a character talking about essentially the prison of politics. And they say he was trapped, he couldn't stop running, master of his domain. He didn't even own a hole in a log. He knew the date he stopped being mayor, so did the free desserts. He'd have nothing to give his friends, nothing to frighten his enemies, and nothing to trade for protection.
Yeah.
Now, is this a good reason to be in politics?
The character there is speaking of the mayor who has died.
Right.
And no, of course it's not a good reason.
I mean, there's a lot of cynicism in that.
But it happens.
Yeah.